In April of 1969, the quiet paddocks of Riverside International Raceway were rocked by something no one had seen before. IndyCar veteran Lloyd Ruby had just shattered the qualifying record in a Chevrolet Camaro that, at first glance, looked like any other car on the grid. But when NASCAR inspectors swarmed it and stripped it down, they found an arsenal of tricks hidden beneath its black and gold skin. The culprit wasn't the driver. It wasn't even the chassis mods. It was the heart of the car, a radical new small block with cylinder heads so wild they looked more like they belonged on a Chrysler Hemi than a Chevrolet 302. The engine was a Smokey Yunick creation, born in secrecy in a Florida garage, and for one brief moment it threatened to change racing forever. The story of Smokey Yunick's 1968 Hemi-Head Camaro is a tale of genius, defiance, corporate fear, and lost opportunity. So how good was it really? The context. Trans Am wars. To understand why this Camaro mattered, we've got to step back to the mid-1960s. Ford had lit the fuse with the Mustang, a car that not only sold like crazy, but also dominated the brand new SCCA Trans Am series. Chevrolet couldn't stand by while their arch-rival racked up wins. They needed a weapon. That weapon became the Camaro Z28, a homologation special designed around a 302 cubic inch small block, the magic number to fit under the 5-litre displacement cap in Trans Am. The Z28 wasn't a car built for comfort. It was built to win races. Chevrolet engineer Vince Piggins described it bluntly. "We didn't build a race car. We built 1,000 street cars that could be race cars." The Z28 sold enough units to qualify, but in race trim, it became a precision instrument in the hands of Roger Penske and Mark Donohue. Together, they tuned the little 302 into a high-revving scalpel, and the Camaro was suddenly a threat. But in the shadows of all that, Chevrolet had another ally. Not Penske, not Donohue, a rule-bending, cigar-smoking mad scientist named Henry Smokey Yunick. Who was Smokey Yunick? Smokey Yunick was no ordinary mechanic. A World War II bomber pilot turned automotive genius. He built his reputation in NASCAR and IndyCar, with cars that were always a little too clever. Smokey believed that if the rulebook didn't explicitly forbid something, then it was fair game. That philosophy earned him both victories and enemies. By the late 60s, he'd already won the Indy 500 as a chief mechanic, scored dozens of NASCAR victories, and had a reputation as the most feared garage man in America. His Daytona Beach workshop, known simply as the best damn garage in town, became a laboratory of innovation. He acid-dipped cars to shave weight. He reshaped windshields and drip rails for hidden aerodynamic gains. He re-engineered suspension pickup points for better handling, but disguised them to look stock. Smokey didn't just tweak cars, he rewrote them, then disguised them as legal. The new Camaro was the perfect canvas for him. And when he put his stamp on it, the results would terrify rivals and leave historians arguing for decades. The cars themselves. Smokey built at least 3 Camaros during this period. 2 were small block cars designed for the 5-litre Trans Am class, and 1 was a big block brute aimed squarely at endurance records. The small blocks weren't just lightly tuned Z28s. They were completely re-engineered machines. Underneath their showroom looks, Smokey had acid-dipped the bodies until the metal was razor-thin. He cut and re-welded the front subframes to lower the center of gravity without anyone spotting it. He moved suspension points, smoothed the underbody, raked the windshield, and even shaved the drip rails to clean up airflow. Each mod gave just a little bit of speed. Stacked together, they transformed the Camaro into a weapon. On paper, Smokey's cars were legal. Solid lifter small blocks, Muncie 4-speeds, positraction rear ends, all things you could technically order from a Chevrolet catalog. But in practice, these cars shared little with what rolled off the production line. They were racing machines wrapped in a disguise. The Hemi-Head 302. At the heart of this legend was an engine unlike anything Chevrolet had ever mass-produced, the experimental Hemi-Head 302. Officially, it was a small block. In reality, it was a Frankenstein prototype. 3 men were behind its creation. Dave Martins, Chevrolet's port wizard, sculpted the airflow parts. Charlie Turner, a former Chrysler engineer with Hemi experience, designed the semi-hemispherical combustion chambers. And Smokey himself, the integrator, bolted it all together into something the rulebook never anticipated. The cylinder heads had canted valves, hence the nickname Porcupine Heads. which allowed much larger valves than a stock 302. We're talking 2.05-inch intakes and 1.94-inch exhausts. Huge for a small block. The spark plugs sat closer to the chamber center for more efficient combustion. On top sat a one-off aluminium cross-ram manifold, designed only for these heads, fed by two Holley 4295 carburetors that gulped a combined 1,170 cubic feet of air per minute. That's nearly double what a production Z28 carb could manage. Compression was a wild 12.5 to 1, demanding exotic race fuel. Magnesium valve, covers cut weight, and cleared the complex valve train. Even the water pump was aluminium. Dyno numbers varied. Hot Rod magazine famously printed a figure of 501 horsepower, naturally aspirated from just 302 cubic inches. That number made headlines, but was likely a best-case scenario under short dyno pulls. In race trim, more conservative estimates put reliable output at 430 to 450 horsepower. Still, that was at least 100 horsepower, more than the production Ironhead 302 and comfortably beyond what Ford's Boss 302 could manage at the time. But this came with trade-offs. The massive ports and valves meant air velocity at low RPM was poor. The engine was lazy below about 6,000 revs. To make power, it had to scream all the way to 7,500 or even 8,000 RPM. On a qualifying lap, that was fine. In a 2-hour Trans Am race, it was risky. Drivers described it as brutal, thrilling, and terrifying. Lloyd Ruby said, "This thing pulls like a jet fighter, but it feels like it's going to blow sky high any second." Riverside, 1967. Sending a message. Before the Hemi-Head was unleashed, Smokey took his Camaros west in 1967. Officially, he was headed to Bonneville for record attempts. Unofficially, he stopped at Riverside Raceway, where Ford's Bud Moore Cougar team was testing. Smokey flat-towed his black Camaro behind a battered pickup truck and rolled it into the paddock like a man with nothing to prove. He put Lloyd Ruby in the seat, and the car turned laps faster than the previous year's pole time. Hot Rod magazine's Jim McFarland was there to witness it. Within hours, Smokey packed it back up and disappeared, leaving Ford's team stunned. He didn't come to race, he came to intimidate, and it worked. Bonneville. Records fall. At Bonneville, the cars went from myth to menace. Over nearly 2 weeks in 1967, Smokey's Camaros attacked record after record. Reports vary on the total count, but at least 30 FIA and USAC benchmarks fell, with some accounts claiming hundreds. The small block cars ran relentlessly at speeds above 170 miles per hour. The big block car, detuned to 540 horsepower for reliability, stretched toward 190 miles per hour. Drivers like Mickey Thompson, Curtis Turner, and Bunky Blackburn pushed them through night runs on the salt, headlights barely visible against the darkness. Engines blew, tires shredded, and mechanics froze in the desert night. But Smokey's cars kept resetting the record books. The results embarrassed rival manufacturers and infuriated officials. Ford lobbied to have events delayed. The FIA quietly began adjusting its rulebook. Even General Motors, who had unofficially supported Smokey, distanced themselves once reporters started asking questions. The record stood, but the politics made sure Smokey's victory was a lonely one. Sebring, 1968. Front row speed, fragile heart. In early 1968, the Smokey Camaro entered the Trans Am race at Sebring. With Al Unser Sr. and Lloyd Ruby at the wheel, the car qualified on the sharp end of the grid, right alongside Penske and Donohue's factory-prepped Z28s. The speed was real, the potential was obvious, but during the race, the car faltered. Mechanical gremlins ended its run before it could challenge for victory. That was the paradox of Smokey's builds. They were fast enough to scare you, but fragile enough to break your heart. Riverside, 1969, the flashpoint. The Hemi-Head's big moment came in April 1969 at Riverside. Lloyd Ruby qualified the Camaro with the Hemi 302 under the hood, and it set a new record. Rivals were stunned. For a brief moment, it looked like Smokey's outlaw engineering had given Chevrolet the edge over Ford's Boss 302. But then came the teardown. NASCAR inspectors didn't find fault with the engine. Instead, they nailed the car for Smokey's usual chassis tricks: acid-dipped body panels, lowered subframe, and suspension geometry changes. The car was disqualified. The engine had proven its pace, but the rest of Smokey's package had crossed too many lines. Once again, The Camaro vanished as quickly as it had arrived, leaving only whispers behind. Don Yenko and Daytona. The Camaro's story didn't end with Smokey. The car eventually passed into the hands of Don Yenko, Chevrolet's other performance outlaw. Yenko entered it in NASCAR's Grand Touring division at Daytona in 1969. The car qualified on pole, then stormed to victory in the Florida Citrus 250, winning by an entire lap. That was proof. Smokey's car wasn't just fast in qualifying or in record runs. It could win races, even when someone else was holding the wheel. Why GM pulled the plug? With proof of speed on the table, why didn't Chevrolet roll out the Hemi-Head 302 as their secret weapon? The answer is politics. First, Penske and Donahue were already winning championships with the Ironhead 302. Why risk upsetting a proven formula? Second, the Hemi 302 was expensive, fragile, and difficult to support. Chevrolet would have had to build at least 1,000 homologation engines to make it legal, and that was never going to fly with bean counters. Third, General Motors was still under its corporate no factory racing ban, enforced since 1963. They were already bending their own rules by quietly supporting Penske and Smokey. If the Hemi 302 had gone public, NASCAR's Bill France would have had every reason to ban it, and GM risked retaliation in its much bigger NASCAR program. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze. Smokey himself summed it up best. They didn't kill it because it wouldn't work, he said. They killed it because it would work, and they were too damn scared of France and Ford bitching about it. The resurrection. After its brief racing career, the number 13 Camaro disappeared. For years it was thought lost, a ghost of the salt flats. Then in the 1990s, performance parts titan Vic Edelbrock Jr. tracked it down, half buried in snow in upstate New York. He bought it, restored it, and returned it to life. Under the paint, they found Smokey's fingerprints everywhere. Acid-dipped panels, subframe mods, traces of salt still lodged in the undercarriage. Edelbrock's team preserved rather than erased these quirks. The car wasn't turned into a shiny showpiece. It was rebuilt as Smokey built it. Through the 1990s, Edelbrock even drove it in vintage racing events. Crowds flocked to see it, not as a museum piece, but as a living legend. Engineers studied it like archaeologists, tracing welds and measuring geometry, trying to decode Smokey's final secrets. Smokey himself once hinted the car had one trick no one ever found. He never said what it was. Maybe it's in the fuel system, maybe in the bodywork, maybe it was just Smokey, laughing from beyond. The verdict. So how good was Smokey Yunick's 1968 Hemi-Head Camaro? On speed alone, it was brilliant. It qualified at the front in Trans Am, won a major race under Don Yenko, and set records at Bonneville that still turn heads. The Hemi-Head engine was real, powerful, and exotic, though not the 500-horse miracle some stories make it out to be. It delivered peak horsepower gains, but at the cost of drivability and reliability. The genius of the car was never just the engine, it was the total package. The weight savings, the aero tweaks, the suspension geometry, and the relentless willingness to exploit every loophole. Was it bulletproof? Not even close. Smokey's cars were always fragile at the edges. But were they great? Absolutely. The number 13 Camaro proved that brains could beat budgets, that creativity could humble corporations, and that one stubborn man in a Florida garage could scare giants. The legacy is this: Smokey Yunick's Hemi-Head Camaro wasn't just good, it was unforgettable. A rolling middle finger to conformity. A machine that bent the rules until they broke, then dared the world to stop it. If greatness is measured in speed, impact, and legend, then this Camaro wasn't just good. It was one of the greatest Camaros ever built.